please.
Good morning. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentations. It's very hard to follow on those. That's so inspiring. Again, my name is Fatma Mili. I'm the Dean of the College of Computing and Informatics at the University of North Carolina in Charlotte. How do I move the slides?
I think people were pressing the red.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I will start by giving a little bit of context. First of all, yes, we do have an equity problem. There is inequity in the system. And I will start by giving a context mostly in the educational environment in the US. And I will go through some of these slides fairly quickly. This basically lists the representation of different population groups in the US and then their representation in STEM occupations. And for example, white men are 31% of the US population, but they are 49% in STEM occupations. So that's overrepresentation. If you have underrepresentation of some groups must be overrepresented. If you take, on the other hand, black men and black women, they are 6% and 7% of the populations respectively, and they are 2% and 4% in the STEM occupations. The same thing, Hispanic men and Hispanic women are about half what they should be. And I definitely take the point that socioeconomic plays an important role in this, and there is lots of intersectionality between these, but these are the numbers that we have. So when we talk about underrepresentation in STEM, we have the gender underrepresentation, but we also have the ethnic gender representation. And if we talk in terms of ethnicity, Black, Hispanic, and Native Americans together represent 31% of the US population. And if we did not have inequity, then they should be 31% of the bachelors, 31% of the masters, 31% of the PhDs. But if you look at the PhDs, for example, again, given their representation in the overall population, 1 out of 3 PhDs should be one of these minorities, yet it's only 1 out of 10. And I know in the keynote speaker this morning, we had a slide showing the evolution in the last 50 years. I have the last 20 years here, and we see that, yes, there is a positive slide here, there is a positive trend. Things are getting better, but they're getting better too slow. This is, we will never get there if we keep increasing at this rate. The other thing that we need to note, and if we take women, for example, very often we talk about STEM. So the representation of women in science, technology, engineering, and math, lumping together all of the sciences. When we look at it more closely, actually, it's not, their underrepresentation is not equal throughout all the sciences. There are some sciences where they are equally represented, and there are some sciences where they are very much underrepresented. So we do well in psychology, for example, where 75% at all levels are women. But then when you look at some disciplines such as physics and my own discipline, computer science, the number of women is 17%. And unfortunately, the numbers have been going down and not up. So, given all of this, what have we been doing about it? Is it that we have been sitting idle, ignoring the problem? The fact of the matter is there has been tremendous amount of activities, a tremendous amount of investment from all different partners. So in this slide here, I have on the left-hand side, federal organizations in the US. So the National Science Foundation, the National Institute of Health, the American Society of Engineering Education, and so forth. All of these organizations, as long as I have been in academia, have been investing tremendous amount of resources, funding, creating programs, etc., all of them focused on changing the trend in creating more diversity in STEM. We also have nonprofits and foundations, and I list here 4 foundations that, that are very much focused on, or that primarily fund this, or in part fund this in a significant way, and they also have offered lots of investment in funding initiatives and programs that increase diversity in STEM. And in my previous slides talked about women and underrepresented minorities in occupations. So how is the industry dealing with this? And here the same thing. It's a problem that almost everyone is aware of. They know that when we don't have equal representation of all segments of societies, we all lose. And there are some of the younger organizations, many of them led by women, actually, and especially in software, that do much better than the majority. But also some of them, and we have to recognize, so GM, for example, that historically has not been the most open in terms of women and diversity, has turned the corner. And it's not there yet, but there is definitely a level of awareness and investment, etc. If we look at higher education, and if I focus for a minute on computer science, again, the question is, this is in computing, if we look just at women for a minute, we should have 50% in all of these universities. Here I listed 6 of the universities who we see over and over in the news. They have succeeded in increasing the number of women in computing in a significant way. For example, Harvey Mudd College has 40% women. And the message is, what about you, other universities? What are you doing? How come you're not succeeding there? Mm-hmm. And Harvard, Dartmouth, Rice, MIT, and so forth, all of these institutions, when you look at them compared with overall the landscape of higher education, they are able to show much better number than the rest of us. So what have they been doing? So some of the initiatives that these successful universities, and actually everybody else, have been doing is targeted recruitment. So don't wait for these students to come to you. You have to be very, you have to go and target them in the recruitment. Inclusive messages and communication, the way we present ourselves, the type of pictures we put on our brochures, the language that we use is extremely important. Improved preparation. So several of the presenters mentioned the issue of K-12, the fact that we don't have an equal, equitable K-12 education means that by the time they come to us, to some extent the game is already rigged. To some extent, students from lower socioeconomic status have attended schools that have a different level of preparation. So maybe we can improve some of that preparation by working with K-12 universities, by working with K-12 schools, or by offering some additional preparation on campus and so forth. Bridge programs, and many universities do this. When the students are admitted, before they come to us in the fall, offer bridge programs that prepare them academically as well as culturally. Financial support is extremely important. Not everybody has, it's not just a matter of being accepted, it's also a matter of being able to afford it. mentoring and coaching. So this is pretty much the portfolio that almost every university who cares about these issues is undertaking at different levels with different levels of intensity. And these are the type of programs that I have been familiar with, again, and I'm publicizing here to everybody. Yes, I have been in academia for 30 plus years. So for 30 years, you would expect that looking back and looking now, things have changed drastically. Unfortunately, that is not the case. And this is just one of the graphs. This is women representation in science. And again, this graph is expanded out to make sure to emphasize the fact that the curve is going up. But when you look at the scale, this only goes up to 12. And this is looking at underrepresented women from underrepresented groups and their representation in the different sciences. You look at computer science, on the other hand, and unfortunately, the line is going in the wrong direction. Go back for a second. So the question is, what's happening? Again, if you look at the last 30 years, we have been investing billions and billions of dollars as a nation, have made significant commitment verbally and financially and in terms of human resources. And we said, equity is important for us. We need to do something about it. Here are some things that we need to be doing. And the result is not there to show that things have worked. In some cases, it sounds like they're counterproductive. Again, if we look at computer science, where the numbers are going down. So what's the explanation for that? And I apologize, this slide has too many words, but let me explain a little bit. This is, there is a very short paper that was written by Donella Meadows, a system engineer, who has been looking at many different contexts where we have a system and we try to change the system. And every system has different leverage points that we can affect. And there are some obvious leverage points that we usually go for first. And there are some leverage points that are much deeper and much more hidden and much more impactful in general. The idea is that most systems, most long-lasting systems, have developed their own resilience. So you can poke them whichever way you want from the outside, they'll do just fine, they'll readjust. And this is what changing variables, changing parameters does. So when you have a huge system that has been stable for years and you want to change its behavior in some fundamental ways, you can play all you want with those parameters. That is the least effective way and at least a non-lasting way to change a system. And that's in the list of from the least effective to the most effective, these are the top ones. It's finding those negative loops and trying to play with them, or the positive loops. What is the most effective way? The most effective way is really to go to the heart of it. What is this? What is the system created for? What is the mindset from which the system arises? What is the goal of this thing? So when we look at higher education, what was higher education created for? Was it created to generate equity in society? These are the questions that we need to ask. If we don't ask these questions, then again, we can spend, and we have spent 30 years playing with these variables with some impact, but some impact that really does not justify the huge investment that we have made. I love this quote, and this is, again, says a little bit the same thing, but in a more contextualized way. I'm testing my vision here. No one can define or measure justice, democracy, security, freedom, truth, or love. No one can define or measure any value. But if no one speaks up for them, if systems aren't designed to produce them, if we don't speak about them and point towards their presence or absence, they will cease to exist. So this is really the question that we need to look at if we are interested in equity. And we are looking at the higher education system. The question is, we have to figure out how is this higher education system designed to produce equity or is not designed to produce equity. And very often we like metrics, we like graphs, we like numbers, and therefore we look for things that we can measure easily. And the fact of the matter is these things are not measured easily, but we really have to start doing the hard work of asking the much more foundational questions. I'll skip this slide. So if we really want to have some lasting impact on higher education, then we have to, again, going back to the original, the most effective leverage point in education is to change the mindset from which the system arises, change the mindset from which higher education arises. And several of you mentioned earlier that we are the means by which we are reproducing this, and we being faculty and administrators, etc. So when we talk about changing the mindset, it's easy to say it's them. This is the system, and when we point to the system, we point to somebody in some office in some university, and versus saying the mindset is us collectively. And this is a collective work that we need to do together. And so the title of my presentation was There is no magic bullet. There is no silver bullet, and that's the bad news. The good news is it doesn't mean we shouldn't try. It just means that this is a much more complex and deeper work that needs to happen versus, again, something that, an office that we put somewhere in the university that will make this change. So what I have to share with you is 3 different experiences, 3 different cases that we have done in the university. And I cannot promise you numbers that says, yes, we have increased or multiplied or doubled. There are no metrics here, just some experience of a group of people who have worked together to change the mindset. The first one comes from my previous institution, and I know Chris Saley, one of my colleagues who was in this group, is in the room. Hi, Chris. So this first one is the Faculty Community of Practice in Equity and Privilege. This is a group of faculty and administrator, and sometimes they were joined by students as well, who came together with a common interest in these issues of equity, inequity, of the fact that in STEM we have not been doing very well in changing the equation, and said, and who accepted their responsibilities. Instead of pointing to something must be happening somewhere, it's the admission office, it's K-12, it's somebody else, is to say it's us. Let's look in the mirror and see if the culture in our classrooms, if the curriculum that we're providing, if what it is that we are doing that is not as inclusive as it's supposed to be. And we started with the premise that this is a much more complex thing than saying, I'm for equity, therefore I'm done. Understanding that these are really very complex issues. We all have implicit biases, as several of you have mentioned, that they are implicit. We're not aware of them. They manifest in different ways. And some of them, we haven't really done the intellectual exercise of understanding it. And why is it that we're holding very tight to these biases? Why are they important for us? Why is it hard for us to change them? All of these are hard conversations. They are hard questions for us to address that are best done in community, that are best done in a community of people who establish some level of trust and trust in each other, and who understand that they will not be judged, and that this is a group of people who will help each other discuss these things. And one of the things that we talked about is this is a group of faculty. Faculty tend to be cerebral in a way, so it was very important to bring in some data, to bring in some, to approach it as a research question, and to understand and not to, and to discuss it from all possible sides. And what I'm listing in this slide is some of the things that we have read together. For example, the Whistling Vivaldi is all about the stereotype threat, and it's a fascinating book. You may know about what the stereotype threat is, but it lists study after study at different depth of how real stereotype threat is, how it affects people in the way they perform. It affects them physically, it affects their health, it affects their lifespan. And again, reading that together is really such an eye-opener. We also didn't want to be dismissive of any questions. So, for example, the Robert Putman's study about diversity, and is diversity good? Is diversity always good? And we read the paper where he measured the social capital in different societies depending on whether they are diverse or not. And the study basically recognizes the fact that, yes, as a human being, we're much more comfortable when we're surrounded by people who are like us. Life gets much easier. And when you put lots of diversity in the beginning, there is mistrust. There is less volunteering. The social capital decreases. But in the long run, it's beneficial. It's a much better society. So at least acknowledge that, discuss it, and so forth. So it was very important for us to look at these things from all different sides with open mind. And as I said, these are very complex issues. This is a problem that is persistent. It means that reversing it will take hard work and requires that we acknowledge all the complexities of this. The next case study is at UNC Charlotte, the College of Computing and Informatics. So last year we started our strategic planning exercise, and very quickly decided that rather than, again, putting some numbers and putting some lofty goals of saying, 5 years from now we want to be ranked X or ranked Y, we said, let's focus instead of who are we? Who do we want to be? And identified 3 different values. The first one is to acknowledge inequity and commit to do everything in our power to address it. So we ended up with 3 values, but really the critical one for us here today is this one. So here's a college of computing and informatics with about 100 faculty, and the leadership got together and said, here's the value in this college. It's a bit unusual. So this is the statement that the leadership came up with, and we said, okay, now we need to, let's bring in the faculty and see what they think about this. Presented it at the faculty forum. Okay, what do you think, everybody? Look good? Next. Let's move on to the next thing. So that was so rewarding and so uplifting, yet we realized that it's not enough to say, okay, this is a good value, let's adopt it and move on. It was very important for us to really, for every single one of us in the college to own it, to understand what does it mean, what does it mean for us to commit to do everything in our power to address it. And it's very easy to say, as a faculty member, what power do I have? I just teach the students I get, I will treat them equally well, and that's it, I'm done. So we really needed again to do the hard work of collectively, let's get together and understand what does this mean. So we reserved a couple of weeks throughout the semester, and every week we say, here's the theme of the week. Let's talk about it. So when the week where we talked about the question of inequity, we're, again, computer scientists, start with data. Presented this. These are our students. So in the US, all students to enter into the university take the SAT. There is a movement to change that, but pretty much that's one of the most common ways to measure how well prepared the student is. And the SAT scores go up to 1,600. So students who score in the 1,200 to 1,600 are the most well-prepared students. So we would expect them to succeed, to finish their degree and graduate with a degree. And if you ignore all the other lines, just look at the dark blue. This graph pretty much says, yeah, it's true. SAT does predict success in college. So somebody who comes in with the highest score has more than 80% of graduating. And it decreases a little bit. And students who come in, who get admitted with the lowest score, their graduation rate is about 20%. So this makes sense. Now look at the different colors. So the dark blue is not all of our students. It's all of the students who are from the highest socioeconomic group. So within the group of students who had between 1,200 and 1,600, divided them up, where is their socioeconomic status? How much money do they have? How much money do they need? And there it's striking. The success rate, in some places it's half. And earlier, I think the keynote speaker says the best predictor of success is not your SAT, it's how much money do you have. And this is what this is saying. So before that, we've had lots of discussion in our faculty. Maybe we should increase our acceptance criteria and so forth. We have lots of students who are not well prepared, etc. So we put this, distributed this, and we had so many questions in the beginning of disbelief. This can't be. What's happening? Why? So we spent 3-4 days discussing the why. How could that be? So first of all, the obvious. Yes, students who come with socioeconomic need, who come with financial needs, are not students 100% of the time. Typically, they have other obligations. Typically, they have other worries. Typically, they have other things in their mind. Then the discussion, it's the layers of the onion that kept coming off one by one. The question is, so if that's the case, again, as faculty, what can we do? We have no power over this. We talked about increasing the number of students we employ on campus, and we have, this year relative to last year, we multiplied the number of students employed by the college by 3. So we said, this is something definitely we can do. But it goes beyond that. What else can we do? So some of our faculty were a bit more informed or a bit more aware of social sciences. some of them brought up the issue of power distance. So research in social sciences tells us that students from high socioeconomic status have very small power distance between the student and the faculty. They're not intimidated. They are very comfortable coming and negotiating every single thing. They're very good advocates for themselves, which is a good thing. But this means that you can put a requirement, put a deadline. Sorry. The students who will come to you and say, no, please push the deadline, I need this, and will argue to death and you give in, are the students who are from high socioeconomic status and the students that will end up succeeding. The students that will just take that for granted and accept that, too bad, I missed the deadline, are the students who actually need that. So faculty started discussing this, and several of them said, oh, I'm going to change something in my syllabus based on this. As it turned out, one of this was a discussion between all faculty and employees. One of the employees happened to be a student and said, here is something else. When you give us assignments, if you give me an assignment on Monday that's due Friday, usually I can't do that. I'm working in the middle. So if you give it to me long enough ahead of time, yes, I can plan for it. I'm not a student full-time who has no other obligations. This is also something that resonated with the faculty. And I cannot do justice to the discussion that took place forever that really turned around these, with different faculty having light bulb coming up and saying, oh, I'm going to do something about this. And the difference between us telling them do this and them collectively helping each other, thinking about these things and deciding and identifying things that they are currently doing in class that are not conducive to equity was extremely important. And the recognition that we are all in this journey at different level, with different level of knowledge, background, etc., but we all can travel through this. But it has to be one of the things that I give lots of credit to is the level of trust and comfort that the whole college had in discussing this openly. I know I'm
quickly running out of time.
So I will skip the last one. This is, in parallel to this, we have undertaken another review of the curriculum with the idea that everything that we do is to be questioned and is to be re-examined. And we are looking, again, at redesigning the curriculum with the idea of how do we design it around inclusiveness. We cannot again, the whole idea is the system has to be designed with that one of the main criteria. So,
wonderful.
So again, there is no silver bullet, but there are a number of things that we can do. Changing the mindset is slow, patient, collective journey. It may take a long time, but then you look at what we have done in the past 30 years and the past 50 years, that takes time, that takes lots of resources, and the results are not there to show for it. It starts with creating a safe space so that we're not pointing fingers at anybody, and so that we also recognize that if people who are not currently contributing to addressing this problem is not because they are bad people, but because they are, again, they are at different stages of this collective journey. And it's not an industrial farming where we decide from now on we're all planting corn everywhere. It's really much more gardening where you cultivate the soil and see what emerges, and that's the conversation in the faculty where you don't tell anybody what to do and let them come up with their own ideas and their own suggestions.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll ask you to stay with us.